Hi, my name is Avery Davis, and this is my final biology project. So recently, my whole family caught COVID. My mom became really sick with it. My younger sister and I were also very sick, but we had much more mild symptoms, and my youngest brother and youngest sister were completely asymptomatic. However, what's most interesting to me is that my father did not catch it at all. So throughout this whole process of him taking care of us, not social distancing, and not wearing a mask, he kept testing negative for the virus and for antibodies. So this spurred my question as to what factors play a role in your susceptibility and or reaction to the COVID-19 virus. So since there isn't a clear answer of as to why, I decided to explore a variety of different theories and different factors. So it's already known that older people or people with underlying health conditions are much more prone to a severe reaction to the virus and make up most of the documented deaths of COVID-19. However, on the other side of things, there have also been many cases of young and perfectly healthy individuals that have severe symptoms and older adults with no symptoms at all. So, as we continue to learn more about COVID-19, hopefully we can come to a better understanding as to why this virus affects everyone so differently. The first theory that I chose to explore is age. So, similarly to other infections, the most common risk for a severe COVID-19 reaction is age. According to the CDC data, adults over 65 are more susceptible to an extreme reaction. Compared to 18 to 29-year-olds, if you're between the ages of 50 to 64, your risk of hospitalization quadruples and your risk of death is 30 times higher. On the other side of things, the risk of hospitalization and death is significantly lower if you are under 18 years old. So there's recently been a really large increase in the cases of young adults. However, scientists just speculate that this is due to the reopening of social spaces and college campuses. Additionally, 60% of frontline workers are under 50. So as people are beginning to return to work and with less social distancing protocols, there are much more places that they could be exposed to the virus. So this makes up for the fact that in the beginning of March, 10% of the US population, people 18 to 49, made up almost 28% of the hospitalizations. By the end of June, that percentage increased to 40%. So theory 2 is race. So along with age, COVID-19 has been shown to affect certain racial groups more than others, specifically the Black and Hispanic people who are dying from COVID-19 at 2.4 and 1.5 the rate of white people. So in addition, even though there's a lot of evidence that states younger people are less at risk and are usually asymptomatic, this is not necessarily true for all racial groups. The CDC states that Black and Hispanic people make up 2/3 of COVID deaths in children and young adults under the age of 65. There are many factors that can contribute to specific races being severely affected by COVID-19 in comparison to others, such as discrimination systems like healthcare, working jobs that put them more at risk, gaps with language barriers, education, income, and even genetic factors such as the sickle cell trait. Theory 3 is underlying health conditions. So altogether, regardless of your age or race, if you have these certain underlying health conditions, you have an increased risk of a severe COVID-19 reaction. So according to COVIDnet, diseases such as high blood pressure, obesity, metabolic conditions, and cardiovascular diseases make up most of the underlying conditions in hospitalized adult COVID-19 patients. So theory 4 connects back to our unit learning standard on human cells. So everyone has something called angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptors, also known as ACE2 receptors, on the surface of cells all over their body. And it is proven that COVID-19 infects our cells through those receptors. However, researchers have also found a correlation between these ACE2 receptors and the cells in the lungs of smokers. So they found that these cells in lungs of smokers have notably more ACE2 receptors than in the lungs of people who don't smoke. So ACE2 receptors kind of filter out the irritating chemicals in your lungs. So smokers have more of these receptors because these ACE2 receptors filter out the irritating chemicals such as cigarette smoke that can damage your lungs. So while ACE2 protects smokers' lungs in the short term, it does increase risk of COVID-19 infection and more severe symptoms, and can lead to more severe symptoms. However, on the positive side of things, ACE2 receptors are shown to be diminished in children with many allergies and asthma, even diminished from the normal amount, the healthy amount. So suggesting that people with asthma and people with allergies are not at risk, are not at a very high risk in contracting COVID. So the first diagram is a picture of non-smoker cell and a smoker cell. So those blue little goblet looking things, those are supposed to represent the ACE2 receptors. So as you can see in the non-smoker side, they have 2 ACE2 receptors, while in the smoker side, there are 5 ACE2 receptors. So this is just symbolizing that in smokers' lungs, there are a significantly higher amount of ACE2 receptors. Then in the diagrams below, that spiky ball represents the SARS coronavirus 2. And those spikes on the end are called spike proteins. So spike proteins attach themselves to the ACE2 receptors and transmit the genetic material. So if you see inside on the diagram farthest to the right, there's this little kind of loopy thing with blue dots on it inside the SARS-CoV-2 virus. That represents the genetic material. So as the spike protein latches onto the ACE2 receptor, it transmits the virus's genetic material into the cell and fools the cell into mass producing the virus throughout the body. So this is how the virus produces through the body and how symptoms kind of rapidly spread as soon as you're exposed to the virus. So theory 5, blood type. So there are 8 different blood types. There's A, B, O, and AB, and all of these have a positive and a negative. So the A and B are molecules on the surface of the red blood cells that trigger an immune reaction. These are also called antigens. The positive or negative that correlates to each blood group determines if an Rh protein is present. So positive means that the protein is present, negative means that the protein is absent. So in a blood type like A positive, that means that the blood has an A antigen and it's positive for the Rh protein. So a recent study found that people with A positive, B positive, and AB positive blood types were much more likely to contract COVID than people with type O positive and O negative. Data also shows that certain blood types are associated with developing blood clots and heart disease from COVID-19. One possibility of why this might happen is that the different antibodies made by the different blood types could play a role in how the immune system fights off infection. However, a lot is still very unknown about if or how this might work. So there definitely needs to be more studies conducted in order to really, truly understand if there is a correlation between COVID-19 and blood type. So this is just a short diagram of the 8 different blood groups. So as you can see, there's O, B, A, and AB. This black antigen is a symbol of the Rh protein. So in all of the positive blood types, O positive, B positive, A positive, and AB positive, those black circles are present, which indicates that the Rh protein is present in all of the positive blood types. And similarly, in the negative blood types, the Rh protein is not present, so there are no little black balls. And then on the Bs, there are little blue balls. Those represent the antigen B. So that's what separates someone with type B blood from someone with, let's say, type O blood. And then similarly, on type A, there are the yellow ones, and those yellow little balls represent the antigen A. And then on AB, AB contains both antigen A and antigen B because it's codominant. Theory 6, prior vaccinations. So there's another theory that having certain vaccinations unrelated to COVID-19 could protect you against severe COVID-19 symptoms. So specifically, something called live attenuated vaccines. These are vaccines that contain a weakened version of the virus. So when this vaccine enters the bloodstream, it trains the immune system to fight off the infection. Many people think that these vaccines have also trained the immune system to fight off infections similar to COVID-19, which would result in less severe symptoms. With this theory, some people think that this is why younger children and adults do not usually have severe symptoms, because they've received these live attenuated vaccines earlier in their lives, the standard immunizations and childhood vaccinations more recently. So the specific vaccines in questions are the tuberculosis vaccine or the BCG vaccine. So this is proven to reduce death rates of all causes of death in infants, which is important because it means that this vaccine prevents death from other infections besides just tuberculosis. Using this data, it's possible that the people with the BCG vaccine could be asymptomatic, have reduced symptoms, or have a lower chance of being infected by COVID-19 because BCG prevents other infections. In addition, the MMR vaccine, or the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, is also a live attenuated vaccine. And children usually receive this vaccine as part of their standard immunizations before they go to school, or adults before they go to a new job. But high-risk people and USS members receive MMR as adults. So recently, an outbreak of COVID cases was spread through the USS Roosevelt aircraft carrier, but 20% of the cases were asymptomatic, and the rest had relatively mild reactions. So why is this? Since MMR is given to all service members, this begs the question, does the MMR vaccine play a role in preventing a severe COVID-19 reaction? Although additional studies are needed, scientists at the University of Cambridge also noticed similarities in the structure of COVID-19 and the MMR vaccine. Due to this similarity, the scientists think that the antibodies caused in response to MMR could potentially identify and protect against the COVID-19 virus, ultimately preventing severe symptoms. Scientists at the University of Cambridge also found a correlation between the pneumonia and polio vaccines to COVID-19 severity. They found that people who recently received a pneumonia vaccine had a 28% reduced risk of being infected by COVID. They also found that people who recently received polio vaccines had a 43% reduced risk of being infected. So theory 7, exposure to other coronavirus strains. Researchers found that 40 to 60% of people who have never been exposed to the COVID-19 virus had immune system cells, also known as T cells or white blood cells, that recognize certain parts of the virus. So scientists think that if you've been exposed to other coronavirus, such as the virus that causes the common cold, you might already have pre-existing immunity or protection against the COVID-19 virus. So theory 8, masks. Recently, Monica Gandhi has made a correlation to mask wearing and COVID-19 severity. Monica Gandhi noticed the difference of asymptomatic case numbers on 2 different cruise ships. So she compared the Diamond Princess, where masks weren't used, and the Argentine cruise ship, where masks were used. She found that on the Diamond Princess, where no masks were used, 47% of the passengers infected with the virus were completely asymptomatic. However, on the Argentine cruise ship, 81% of the cases were asymptomatic. Furthermore, according to more research done by Gandhi, countries with implemented population mask mandates had relatively the same percentage of cases but fewer deaths. The countries she included in her analysis were the Czech Republic, Singapore, and Vietnam. In an article published by the Journal of General Internal Medicine, Gandhi mentioned that in early coronavirus outbreaks, when people weren't originally wearing masks, only 15% of cases were asymptomatic. However, much later in the pandemic, when people began to wear masks again, 40 to 45% of the cases were asymptomatic. So, as Gandhi's comparison, US officials have also stated this suggests that wearing masks does not only protect others, but there are also proven benefits of wearing a mask for the wearer. And lastly, Theory 9, which connects back to the Molecules and Cells Learning Standard, or MC Learning Standard A. So, as mentioned earlier, those with underlying medical conditions are at the greatest risk for a severe COVID-19 reaction, specifically those with type 2 diabetes and obesity. But diets high in saturated fat, sugars, and refined carbohydrates, also called the Western diet, contribute to causing these illnesses and therefore cause a more severe reaction to COVID-19. So why? Western diet consumption damages the immune system's adaptability, which leads to chronic inflammation and an impaired defense against viruses. Even further, if you have an unhealthy diet, COVID-19 could cause peripheral inflammation, and this could have long-term consequences such as dementia and neurodegenerative disease, even in those who recover. Although the consequence of unhealthy diets has always been a problem, now more than ever, there should be a strong focus on healthy eating and nutrition to reduce people's susceptibility to the long-term effects of COVID-19. The high rates of obesity and diabetes among minority populations are even more critical to their response to COVID-19. This is likely due to increased barriers to access healthy food choices and nutritional education due to increased rates of poverty and decreased access to quality U.S. healthcare. As a result, this further proves that access to healthy, fresh, whole foods should be made more readily available to those who cannot normally afford it in order to relieve this chronic disease burden that is taking place in these minority communities. Especially given that vaccines have been shown to be less effective in obese people, a change in diet can have long-term benefits on disease prevention and overall health, including severity to COVID-19. Overall, especially in regard to susceptibility and recovery of the virus, a healthy diet is critical. Therefore, individuals should consume foods that are high in unsaturated fats and less foods high in saturated fats. They should consume less foods high in sugar and instead consume high amounts of fiber, whole grains, unsaturated fats, and antioxidants to help boost immune function. So lastly, here's just a little diagram of different vitamins and their benefits and what foods they're found in. So you know what types of foods can help with COVID-19 severity. So zinc, that's prevalent in lean meats, seafood, milk, whole grains, beans, seeds, and nuts. That's extremely important for wound healing. Iron, which is found in lentils, spinach, tofu, and white beans, aids in non-specific immunity, so immunity all over the body, and this is the body's first line of defense against a virus. Then vitamin A, which is found in sweet potatoes, carrots, bell peppers, spinach, black-eyed peas, and mango, and this helps regulate immune response. And vitamin C and E both protect cells from something called oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is a product of chronic inflammation. So overall, both of these vitamins can protect cells from the downsides of chronic inflammation. And then finally, vitamin B6, which is found in green vegetables, chickpeas, and cold water fish, such as tuna or salmon, supports more efficient reactions between different parts of our immune system. So I was most surprised to learn about the different blood types because I saw that people with type O blood had less of a severe reaction and people with type B blood had more of a severe reaction. However, within my family, my mom and I have type O negative, and we had the worst reactions, my mom being almost hospitalized. My dad and brother and two sisters are B negative, and what's even more surprising is that my brother and sisters were completely asymptomatic, and my dad didn't even catch the virus, even though that studies proved that people with B type blood were more susceptible. So although I know that blood types are still being researched and the data is not completely accurate and the same for everyone, I just found it really interesting how my family's experience was completely the opposite of the research shown. And I've also found it really interesting to learn that asthma was not an underlying health condition that would put you at a high risk for COVID-19. Because COVID-19 is a respiratory disease, I assume that having asthma, being a breathing issue, would make your experience that much worse. And one question that I would still like to explore about COVID-19 is what goes on when you're wearing a mask that could possibly lead to a less severe or asymptomatic COVID-19 reaction. I just found Monica Gandhi's research so interesting, and I think that I would definitely really want to keep studying that and keep researching if there are any other factors that could lead to mask wearing, that could link mask wearing to an asymptomatic COVID reaction. So these are just some resources that I use. I try to use a lot of scientific articles and try to gather the most accurate and reliable data. And I just wanted to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I really hope you learned something, and I really hoped you liked my research. Thank you so much.